Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters in Handan and Ijeon. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening to you guys. It's May 10th, which means, believe it or not, it's already been 1 year since President Yoon Suk Yeol was sworn in, took office. He, of course, ushered in the Yongsan era by bringing the presidential office to downtown Seoul, scored a series of diplomatic wins by boosting ties with important regional players. I think, namely, Japan is something that we could look at, looking at the two summit talks that was held already in the past few months during the Yoon administration. But still, challenges remain with big domestic issues piling up, waiting to be resolved here. Don, walk us through the details of the first year in the Yoon administration.
Sure. As President Yoon concludes his first year of presidency, it appears the general consensus is that he achieved major diplomatic feats, but did little to narrow the sharp divide between the conservatives and the liberals here in Korea. President Yoon didn't hold a press hearing marking his first year in office, but he opened the day by visiting the National Cemetery in Seoul today to honor the country's fallen heroes, marking the occasion. There he vowed to create a country of freedom and innovation, a country that responsibly contributes to world peace and prosperity together with the people. He also dropped by the press room at the presidential office this afternoon, asking journalists to continue their accurate and sharp reporting this year as well, and also to lead the government well with their good directions and accurate articles. Now, during yesterday's cabinet meeting, he highlighted his diplomatic achievements. He stressed that the South Korea-U.S. alliance has been elevated to an unprecedented level by adopting the Washington Declaration and creating the Nuclear Consultative Group, which will boost U.S. extended deterrence against North Korean threats. President Yoon held an unusually early summit with President Biden less than a month after taking office and has bluntly sided with the U.S. and his efforts culminated in Washington's boosted nuclear umbrella. Citing his historic attendance at the NATO summit, which marked the first for a South Korean leader, he pointed out that South Korea strengthened global solidarity with nations that share values of freedom and democracy and boosted security ties with those nations. Calling himself Korea's #1 salesman, he also reminded the public how he won strategic investment from the UAE during his state visit that's worth over $30 billion. Although controversies remain, he resumed South Korea-Japan annual bilateral summit that was stalled for 12 years by strongly pushing for a swift resolution of the compensation issue of Japan's wartime forced labor.
It is quite ironic, though, if you think about the start of the Yoon administration, what the biggest hiccup was. It was on the diplomatic front, right? We had the hot mic issue, which led to one of the lowest approval rating for President Yoon. It went as low as 24%, which, I mean, also you have to take into consideration the lowering of the school age, which impacted his approval rating as well. But that culminated into what we're seeing, probably at least on the diplomatic front, President Yoon Suk Yeol doing a pretty good job. We saw at the start of his administration, President Biden coming to Korea first. Usually, traditionally, it was kind of the South Korean president going to the United States first, and then maybe the U.S. president coming. But we had Biden coming to Korea at the start of the Yoon administration, and we had, obviously, President Yoon going to Washington for just a second state visit by a world leader under the Biden administration. And we can say that, obviously, with all that's going on right now with Japan, a great deal of improvement on the diplomatic front. But again, we go back to what you said, Tan. Diplomatic front, there are some challenges that remain. His drive for the three major reforms of labor, education, and pension still appears to have a long road ahead, while the political divide only seems to be worsening right now.
That's right. In the domestic sector, President Yoon did make some progress in his deregulation efforts and bold tax cut policies, including in real estate and corporate taxes. He also scrapped the previous Moon Jae-in administration's nuclear phase-out policy while prioritizing support for Korea's high-tech industries, including semiconductors, to ride out Korea's complex economic crises from high inflation, market instability, and sluggish exports. And the presidential office has touted these efforts as some of the Yoon administration's major domestic achievements, calling it the normalization of the abnormal policies sought by the previous government. And Ji Young will have more on this, but the lack of speed in promoting urgent public welfare and economic policies amid continued worsening divide between the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party remains a major hurdle. A DP-controlled National Assembly means bipartisan cooperation is vital to push forward with his reform, especially in labor, education, and pensions, as well as other state affairs. So we'll have to see if we'll see some improvement on that front during President Yoon's remaining term.
Again, a lot of tit for tat, a lot of trading of blows between the two political parties right now. And of course, despite the fact that there's been some huge, I guess, accomplishments on the diplomatic front, the criticism that President Yoon has been receiving is that there's too little focus on the domestic side, right? Focus on South Korea first, and then maybe focus on some of the other things. But one of the things that the ruling party has been arguing is, well, improving ties with the United States and Japan also affects us domestically. And so that's been the argument. But again, you look at President Yoon and the road that he took in becoming the president. It really is quite impressive if you think about it. I mean, his political career. Probably he had about a year of political career before he became the president. He's a former prosecutor general, again, a newcomer in politics. Because of that, he did face a whole lot of criticism for really biasly appointing cabinet full of former prosecutors, as well as frequent conflicts with the ruling opposition parties. Remember, one of the pledges that he had made was he's going to hire a lot of young people, right, in his cabinet, and also he's going to try to hire a lot of, I didn't say a lot of women, but he's going to try to make it as diverse as possible. But the point being made, young people in his cabinet. That was not the case. It was kind of in the 50s and the 60s, and people that he's known from his previous role as the prosecutor general. And this has caused quite a bit of a clash as well, Jiyoung.
Yeah, that's right, SJ. Now, it hasn't been all sunshine and roses for President Yoon Suk Yeol in the country. From his lack of experience in Yeouido and his criticism of party members interfering with party affairs to his rejection of dominant opposition party legislations through the exercise of his veto power, as well as predominantly appointing men, as you mentioned, in their 50s and 60s from Seoul National Universities, law school, and also former prosecutors, were positions in which they have also little to no experience in the cabinet. So that's why Yoon's leadership style has been questioned. Now, for his diplomacy for values, which he has worked tirelessly for, has been also marred by controversies over vulgar language, the slips of tongue, the hot mic situation, and policy confusion such as the admission of 5-year-olds in schools, and also we can't forget the 69-hour work weeks. Now, even the First Lady, who pledged to take a more quiet and passive role as First Lady, has shown the opposite, having her own activities, political and also promotion activities, which has caused quite a stir. Now, also, close aides say that President Yoon's goal is to become a successful president who will be remembered in history, and that all he cares, and that's all that he cares about. But as we're in the second year mark of the Yoon administration, it remains to be seen how President Yoon will shape the remainder of his term, and whether if he can overcome the mounting criticism.
You know, it's interesting. One of the things that some of the foreign media outlets were covering when President Yoon during his campaign process, right? And they were trying to compare. He's again a political novice, and a lot of things that they were mentioning, they were saying there was a lot of similarities with former President Donald Trump.
Right.
Again, President Trump had very little political experience, but he did have a whole lot of support from the conservatives, which is what President Yoon Suk Yeol had, right? I mean, he was kind of the icon, if you remember, of the anti-Moon administration, right? Everyone that was upset with the Moon administration, they were saying, you know what, he symbolizes kind of, fighting the Moon administration and so forth, and so a lot of conservative votes. But going into, I guess, picking his cabinet members. We've talked about the criticism about predominantly appointing men in their 50s and 60s, whether they be from Seoul National University's law school or former prosecutors. President Yoon tapped the current veterans minister. We know that the Ministry of Veterans Affairs has been upgraded. Park Min-sik is going to be heading the Veterans Ministry after its upgrade next month. Tan, maybe this could be another controversial, appointment given his background here, or he might be very fitting of this role here. Tell us a little bit more about him.
Sure. Park is a prosecutor turned lawmaker who served as the veterans minister since the launch of the Yoon administration. He had been the president's close aide, having led President Yoon's campaign as the camp's director of strategy planning. After graduating from Seoul National University's Department of Political Science and International Relations, he passed the bar exam and worked as a prosecutor for 10 years. Park will officially be named as the head of the new ministry after a parliamentary confirmation hearing. The ministry will be launched early next month. President Yoon signed a revision to the Government Organization Act earlier this year, seeking to upgrade the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs from the current sub-ministry level to full-fledged ministry status. The move is in line with President Yoon's campaign pledge. He has strongly asserted the need to elevate the status of the Veterans Ministry, saying that the government will not forget, under any circumstances, those who answered the call of the Republic of Korea and sacrificed their lives for the nation. On the day President Yoon inked the revision to upgrade of the Veterans Ministry, 25 people were invited to the signing ceremony, including the son and granddaughter of a police official killed during a North Korean commando infiltration in 1968, and the daughter of a Navy sailor killed in North Korea's 2010 torpedo attack on a South Korean warship.
So again, we notice again a trend in the appointments made by President Yoon, a prosecutor turned lawmaker here, and of course a Seoul National University graduate. But all of this don't matter as long as, I guess, he does a good job with his role, and there's no more controversy in regards to that. But controversy. Here's a name that has a lawmaker that has been surrounded by controversy involving some of his remarks here. We're talking about Tae Yong-ho. We mentioned him before. He is a North Korea defector turned lawmaker. He is, of course, of the ruling People Power Party. We talked about the party's Central Ethics Committee disciplinary action, and we were supposed to give you guys an update on it. There was a delay in the decision. They were going to meet again today. Well, it turns out Tae Yong-ho has resigned from his position as the party's highest-ranking official, and he quoted that he no longer wants to burden his party. Jiyoung, tell us more about this.
Sure. Now, at a press conference at the National Assembly on Wednesday morning, Representative Tae Yong-woo stated that he takes full responsibility for all of the controversies that have arisen, and that he no longer wants to cause any trouble for his party. Now, elected to the leadership 2 months ago at the March 8th People Power Party convention, Tae said that he has been working hard to ensure the success of the Yoon Suk Yeol administration over the past year, but has caused significant damage to the party, the government, and the people due to his shortcomings, and he sincerely apologized. Now, Representative Tae has been referred to the Ethics Committee for various issues, including controversial remarks about the April 3rd Jeju incident being ordered by Kim Il-sung of North Korea, which is completely false, posting a message on social media containing the phrase junk monkey sex Democratic Party, and said it was known as the JMS Democratic Party. Also related to the allegations of bribery by the opposition party. And that's not it. The leaked transcript scandal that also sparked controversy over the presidential office's involvement in the People Power Party leadership nomination process. So he is in a middle of a whirlwind of controversies. Now, the Ethics Committee has announced that it will hold a full meeting at 6 p.m. today to determine the level of disciplinary action against Tae Young-ho. Now, the committee's chairman, Hwang Jung-geun, hinted at the possibility that Tae's voluntary resignation could have had an impact on the level of disciplinary action, stating that if a political solution emerges, which could be interpreted as Tae's resignation, the level of disciplinary action could also be adjusted. Now, as the party's constitution and rules stipulate that a national committee meeting must be convened within 30 days to elect a successor to the highest ranking official, the People Power Party is expected to hold a meeting soon.
Again, just like Chiyoung said, there's going to be a full meeting at 6 p.m. It's been, I guess I kicked it off about 20 minutes ago. Hopefully we'll get some more updates on this. The consensus, remember, he's not the only one facing disciplinary, charges from the PPP. And the consensus is that maybe a 1-year suspension is what they're looking at. And 1-year suspension is going to be interesting because next year you have the general elections that are going to happen, and so we'll see what kind of results we'll get on this front. There's also much, like I mentioned, that your party can shield you from, and if it's going to cost voters ahead of the general election, obviously there is going to be some kind of disciplinary action handed down to not just Tae but the other lawmaker as well. We're going to move on here. We talked about extensively throughout this week the visit by Prime Minister Fumio Kishida to South Korea. There was a lot of agreement in place here. And one of the things that the two leaders were able to agree on during their summit over the weekend is to be able to send a team of South Korean inspectors to Japan's crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant to study Japan's planned discharge of the nuclear wastewater. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, is that a concession from Japan? Because they were saying that's something that Japan should have let Korea do in the first place. Now, here's the thing, though. It seems like the two leaders didn't exactly agree on the inspectors' specific roles here. Now, what we heard was they're able to go there, inspect the water and stuff like that, and everything is clear-cut. But we do seem to have like two different sides of things right now. Tan, what's the latest on this?
Well, the key contentious point is this, that South Korea plans to conduct a study that's close to a safety inspection, while Japan drew the line saying there will be no safety evaluation conducted by the South Korean team. The team's visit schedule and specific details of their mission will be discussed at director-level Seoul-Tokyo talks set for this week, but the split signals a bumpy road ahead from the start. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, after the Yoon Kishida summit, the inspection will allow South Korea an opportunity to conduct a multi-layered review and evaluation that are independent from the International Atomic Energy Agency's monitoring team. It said the team will focus on examining Japan's water release plan and conduct a scientific evaluation to verify Japan's water treatment capacity that it claims to possess. It'll also try to confirm the credibility of Japanese data on the contaminated water. But Japanese Industry Minister Yasutoshi Nishimura argued otherwise. He said the inspection will allow South Korea to help deepen the understanding about the safety of the release, but the team won't be evaluating or certifying the safety of treated water, suggesting the scope and authority of the inspection team's activity will be restricted. He added that he will brief Korean inspectors on the status of the storage of contaminated water and the construction of discharge facilities, and explained that the contaminated water will be discharged after lowering the concentration of radioactive substances according to global safety standards, all of which we already know.
Right.
Now, the contrasting interpretation stems from the lack of exact term that describes the mission of the South Korean team. Both South Korea and Japan are refraining from using the term South Korea's independent safety inspection because the IAEA is already onto the safety check mission. South Korean experts are also part of the IAEA's team of experts. And so if South Korea calls it its own independent inspection, it could look as if Korea doesn't recognize the authority of the IAEA, which could be a diplomatic faux pas.
At the same time, I mean, what we're basically looking at is South Korea going from all of us understanding that South Korean inspectors are going to go in there and do their own test and see whether or not it's safe. But now we're finding out that Japan is just going to brief them on what the situation is. There's absolutely no inspection. Then you're going to be a bit skeptical, right? The reason why you have an independent South Korean experts going in there to inspect it is to kind of quell the skepticism, right? Like we don't trust maybe the data that the Japanese, and not to mention, I mean, Japan has had a history of not being too transparent with their data as well. So we know now that there is a bit of a miscommunication between the two sides, but what's been the reaction from the presidential office then?
Well, the office is yet to make an official response, but according to Yonhap News Agency, a presidential official said that the top office maintains the stance that South Korea needs to conduct an inspection and a survey on Japan's planned discharge of radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. The official said that although the IAEA is conducting a safety inspection, it's important to dispatch a Korean team to the scene to see if related water treating facilities are operating well and if Japan really possesses the capacity, the capability to conduct the water release as planned. He clarified that the team's mission is to take a comprehensive overview of Japan's capability to release the nuclear contaminated water in line with required standards. So it's a bit ambiguous there. The official added that Seoul and Tokyo's stance are not contradictory, but it's simply a difference in the use of terminology.
Yeah, I mean, all of this I think would have been avoided if not for, again, a lot of people are saying they don't really trust the data from the IAEA. I think like IAEA kind of came out from the start given a full backing of this, but then there's been so much, I guess, nuclear experts who came out saying that it's bad. I mean, it's not going to be safe, right? And so there's been some conflict amongst the experts. The IAEA saying it's safe, but then there's other nuclear experts who are saying it's not. So who do you trust, right? And especially when you have something, a country so close, like South Korea, and the waters are going to be affected by this, the seafood and all that. You want to get as comprehensive as you can with the inspection here. But if that's not allowed, it's going to be a big problem moving forward here.
Yeah, that's right. And the thing is, it's irreversible. Once the nuclear, the water is in the waters, that you just can't take it back. So that's why we have to be as cautious as possible with this situation.
The impact on humans as well as the marine life will be irreversible.
Yeah, and we talked about tritium, right, being in the waters, and the half-life of tritium, I believe, was something like
a few hundred years, though.
No, the tritium, I believe it was a half-life of tritium. Let's see, I had this, it was 12.33. So initially I thought this means that it would be completely decayed by about 25 years. But one of our listeners who never wrote any messages to us, came back and said that's not how half-life works. It's actually longer than that. It probably comes out to about 30 years. But you're looking at 30 years after it's all been released, right? But then this is going to be released on an interval, and it's going to be ongoing over and over again. So we don't know how much longer. And of course, we had an expert from Seoul National University who said that although people are saying that the wastewater is going to affect us Korea, here in Korea, in about a few years, they said, that's the deep water. But if you look at the surface water, it's going to arrive in the South Korean waters in about 4 to 7 months, I remember what he said. And it's the surface water that's very, very concerning because not only are there people swimming in surface water, there's a whole lot of fishing going on, and most of the fish are caught on shallow waters. And so we'll see what kind of updates we get on this front here. Let's talk about other diplomatic issues. This is something that I can't believe is popping up now. There's still tensions involving the issue of the THAAD missile defense system on the Korean Peninsula. Obviously, China has been very upset with this for the past few years, although they've been relatively quiet. And I think the consensus was that President Xi Jinping would not come to Korea for any sort of summit talks unless he's able to resolve the THAAD issues. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Today, China's foreign ministry called on South Korea to manage the issue properly, avoid unnecessary interference in the relationship between the two countries. This came out of nowhere, to be honest with you, because it says that the THAAD issue is not anything new. So, Jiyoung, tell us more about this.
Sure. Now, the deployment of the THAAD has been a long-standing issue that has rankled the bilateral relations between South Korea and China. And as we know, China has retaliated economically against South Korean firms in response to the system's deployment because of concerns that the radar would be directed at China, despite Korean and American objections. Now, China's foreign ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin also commented on South Korea's so-called three no's policy regarding the deployment of the THAAD system. Now, the three no's policy states that South Korea will not deploy additional THAAD launchers and will not participate in the U.S. missile defense network and will not form a trilateral alliance with the U.S. and Japan. Now, Wang expressed concern that the policy violated agreements reached during a meeting between the foreign ministers of China and South Korea last year. Meanwhile, the defense ministries of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan are reportedly discussing plans to share real-time information on North Korean missile threats, which we reported yesterday on the show.
Right.
And this comes after the three countries agreed to enhance their missile defense cooperation at a summit in November last year. Now, the ongoing cooperation between South Korea, the United States, and Japan on missile defense has also been a major concern for China, as it sees it as a form of restriction and isolation in the region. Now, as tensions continue to escalate in the region, it remains to be seen how this issue will be resolved. So the question is this: will China comments on the THAAD translate into concrete actions and a reduction in tensions in the regions, or are they just blowing smoke?
Well, we kind of question the timing of this, right? I mean, it's not new that China has been upset with the THAAD issue, but over, the span of a few years now, they've maybe decided to kind of overlook it a bit. Like we saw, one of the big, I guess, response from China after the THAAD missile defense system being installed into the Korean Peninsula was that they banned all K content materials, right? And then, ever since about last year, we started hearing that Korean films were being played on movie theaters, and then Korean dramas are being played on their OTT platforms. And so slowly, right, that they're kind of opening up to the K content culture, the K content industry once again. But why all of a sudden are they bringing this up, right? It's the big question. But we'll see what happens. But another thing to look at here, I guess we can say that it's good to see that North Korea has been quiet over the past few weeks now. We haven't seen a whole lot of action from North Korea, which is good, but also you kind of start asking, why are they quiet? It's a little bit weird that they're a bit quiet right now. Well, they did issue their first response to the South Korea-Japan summit. It said that the talks are leading to military collusion, is what they say. So tell us what North Korea have to say about the recent summit.
Well, the reclusive state condemned the Yoon-Kishida summit through its propaganda outlet 우리 민족끼리 today, saying it has paved the way for a military collusion between the two countries. In its first response to the summit, the propaganda website said the military collusion between South Korea and Japan, much wanted by the United States, has entered the stage for it to be recklessly carried out. The website also apparently criticized Yoon's remarks Sunday, suggesting Japan could participate in the Washington Declaration, a Seoul-Washington agreement aimed at strengthening the U.S. extended deterrence commitment. 우리 민족끼리 claimed Yoon's submissive foreign policy has facilitated Japan to cover up its past atrocities and become much bolder in terms of its sovereignty claim over the South's easternmost islets of Tokdo and Tokyo's plan to release contaminated water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. What experts are reading into Pyongyang's harsh criticisms is that it may be threatened by moves to strengthen Seoul-Tokyo security ties. They point out that boosted military cooperation between the two countries, for instance, sharing of real-time information on North Korea's missile activities, could become a huge threat to the reclusive regime.
Yeah, and also you have to take into consideration, but like, in what level of a threat is it? Because if North Korea really truly believes that the summit talk between the two leaders over the weekend is going to bring about a true threat to North Korea, they would probably not have had this on 우리 민족끼리, right? Like, there's a level of they're concerned. So if it's like a really big issue and they're really upset, they'll have it on KCNA.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like, they'll have it on state media. But if they refuse to kind of talk about it on their state media and they actually use 우리 민족끼리, their propaganda website more, it means it's like a step down, right? But then we saw during when the South Korea-U.S. summit happened, they had it every day on KCNA. So like, they were really upset about that. Let's move on here, talk about some economic news. South Korea has managed to turn its current account balance into a surplus in March after experiencing 6 straight months of deficit. Finally, some good news on this front here. Jiyoung, let's get the latest details on this.
Sure. Now, according to the preliminary balance of payments report by the Bank of Korea on May 10th, South Korea's current account surplus in March amounted to $270 million US. Now, this is a significant improvement from the previous 2 months where South Korea recorded deficits of $421 million and $52 million. However, this year's March surplus is still smaller than the $677 million surplus recorded in March 2020 before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Now, the primary income account, which includes wages and profits earned by Koreans from overseas, also posted a surplus of $3.65 billion in March, up $2.61 billion from a year earlier. Meanwhile, the goods account remained in a deficit for the 6th consecutive month, recording a $1.13 billion shortfall, with exports dropping 12.6% year on year due to weakened demand for semiconductors, chemical products, petroleum products, and steel, mainly from China, Southeast Asia, and Japan. Now, also, the services account showed a deficit of $190 million, marking the 13th consecutive months of deficit. Now, this was largely due to a decrease in travel revenue, which fell from a $174 million surplus in March 2020 to a $74 million deficit in March 2021. Now, despite the current account balance still facing challenges, the surplus in March shows that South Korea is making some progress towards economic recovery. And South Korea was able to achieve a current account surplus due to factors such as an increase in dividend income and a decrease in the deficit of the primary income account. Now, this means that despite importing more than they export, South Korea still had more money coming into the country from other sources such as finance, resulting in a surplus.
In the meantime, South Korea's job additions dropped in April after rebounding the month before amid higher borrowing costs and persisting economic slowdown. Now let's get the figures on that.
Sure. The number of employed people came to slightly over 29 million in April, up around 354,000 from a year earlier, according to Statistics Korea. Most new positions were, once again, taken by seniors. Excluding the seniors, the country's new job positions moved down 88,000 in the month. The number of jobs for those in their 50s and 30s moved up 55,000 and 15,000 respectively. The job market remained challenging for younger South Koreans, with the number of jobs for those in their 20s slipping 116,000. By sector, the restaurant and accommodation businesses posted 171,000 additional jobs. The healthcare and welfare industry also gained 148,000 during the same period. The number of jobs in the manufacturing segment, meanwhile, plunged by 97,000, reflecting the country's slumping exports. It marked the sharpest decline since a 110,000 drop tallied in December 2020. Korea's monthly job additions had been slowing since last April, slipping for 9 consecutive months through February, but briefly rebounded in March, adding 469,000 on year. The country's jobless rate fell 0.2 percentage point on year to 2.8%. And Statistics Korea explains that while the number of employed people continued to grow on increased outdoor activities and rising demand for caretaking services, it grew at a smaller margin due to ailing exports.
Let's going to move on here. We're going to talk about the U.S. government thinking about maybe making it harder for South Korean companies that do business in China to import high-tech equipment to be used in making chips. They might even make a special set of rules just for these companies. Jiyoung, can you get the details of this? And how is this going to affect some of the Korean chip makers like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix?
Sure. Now, this news is getting a lot of attention because Samsung and SK Hynix, which are two of the biggest semiconductor companies in South Korea and in the world, were given a 1-year break from the U.S. Restrictions on exporting to China. But that break is set to end in October this year. And it seems like the U.S. government is teaming up with South Korea and Taiwan to try and make things more stable in the chip industry. And they want to keep control over who can send chip technology to China. But they also want to make sure that there aren't any big problems that can cause delays or shortages. Now, the U.S. government hasn't said exactly what the new rules will be yet, but some types of semiconductor equipment might be off limits, and there might be a limit on how advanced the chip technology can be that they're allowed to import. Now, the U.S. government also wants to make sure that China doesn't get any access to really important semiconductor technology. And they're still talking with South Korea about what the new rules will be, and they haven't made any final decisions yet. Now, if separate import standards are established for South Korean companies operating in China, it could make it harder for companies like SK Hynix and Samsung to import advanced semiconductor equipment from the U.S. To upgrade their production facilities in China, which is something that they have been dreading for since the U.S. has been attempting to limit China's involvements in the market.
Big stuff here, and it really is unfortunate. Again, we've even talked about the Micron issue and how the U.S. had said that, just because China is not going to be purchasing any Microns doesn't mean that South Korean companies should go into the market and take advantage of that. But we'll see what happens. Guys, thank you as always with your reports. Have a safe one, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.